The Shadows of Betrayal. In a quiet town surrounded by rolling hills and dense forests, Mr. Edward was known as a gentle and devoted man. A carpenter by trade, he spent his days meticulously crafting furniture that seemed to breathe life into wood. He was married to Clara, a vibrant woman with a smile that could light up any room. To everyone, they were the picture-perfect couple. But behind the closed doors of their modest home, cracks had begun to form. Edward and Clara had been married for 10 years. In the beginning, their love had been a fire that could not be extinguished. Yet as time passed, Edward noticed Clara growing distant. Late-night phone calls, whispered conversations, and unexplained absences began to cloud his mind with suspicion. One evening, Edward decided to confront her. "Clara," he began hesitantly, "what's going on? You've been acting strange lately." Clara's face hardened. "You're imagining things, Edward. Can't a woman have her own space without being interrogated?" Edward wanted to believe her, but the gnawing doubt refused to leave. Weeks later, while working late in his workshop, he overheard Clara laughing outside with someone. Quietly, he crept to the window and saw her with another man, an unfamiliar figure. The two shared an intimate moment before parting ways. Heartbroken and furious, Edward felt his world crumble. The woman he had loved and cherished was betraying him. He spent days brooding, unable to focus on his work, consumed by the image of Clara with someone else. One fateful night, Edward confronted Clara again. This time, his tone was harsher. "I know you're seeing someone else," he accused, his voice trembling with rage. Clara's eyes flashed with anger. "And what if I am?" she retorted. "You've become so obsessed with your work that you've forgotten how to be a husband." Edward's world shattered. In a fit of rage, he grabbed the nearest object, a heavy candlestick, and struck. Clara. The room fell silent except for the sound of his ragged breathing. When he realized what he'd done, Clara lay lifeless on the floor, her once bright eyes now dim. Panic set in. Edward tried to convince himself it was an accident, a moment of madness. But deep down, he knew he could never undo what he had done. The days that followed were a blur. Edward buried Clara in the forest behind their home, hoping to hide his crime. He told the townsfolk she had left him, unable to cope with their failing marriage. But the guilt weighed heavily on him, manifesting in restless nights and haunting visions. Months later, Clara's disappearance drew the attention of local authorities. Edward's inconsistent stories and growing paranoia made him a suspect. It wasn't long before a search team discovered Clara's shallow grave. Confronted with the evidence, Edward broke down and confessed. He was arrested and faced trial. In court, he spoke of his heartbreak and anger, but nothing could justify his actions. The jury found him guilty of murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison. As he sat in his cell, Edward replayed the events in his mind, wondering if things could have been different. The love he had once felt for Clara had turned into a darkness that consumed them both. In the end, Edward's story served as a grim reminder of how unchecked emotions and poor decisions could destroy lives. The townsfolk whispered about him for years, a cautionary tale of love gone wrong.